feeling stuck, or like what you've been doing just isn't working for you anymore. Well, my next guest story is going to inspire you to find the joy in stuckness. Have you ever felt deep within that there's something more you're supposed to be doing, but you're not sure what? Have you ever felt like you're producing a lot, but not expressing at all? Welcome to She Made It. I'm your host, Elle Zimmerman, and I am on a mission to help you cultivate meaning through the path of creativity. Join me to eavesdrop on conversations with brave women who broke through their resistances into a life of authenticity. Because I believe if she made it, you can too. I still can't believe it's 2020.
I can't either. It's so weird to write.
And I just love to say that, 2020. 2020. Exactly. And you pointed out something really, really funny the other day that's actually kind of fun. You said, it's the 20s again.
Right.
And that was such a rip-roaring time, so it's kind of fun.
We'll forget that the Great Depression followed.
Well, that was at the end of the 20s. But yeah, so this is a treat today to have our next guest. And what Jennie really brought out, Jennie Malone, who you're going to hear from, she really brought out that experience of being stuck.
Yeah, that's not a good place to be.
And especially, sometimes that comes because we've just kind of stayed in the same thing for too long. But sometimes it comes when the path we've been on changes.
Right. And it's so uncontrollable sometimes that we get stuck.
Have you ever felt stuck?
I've been thinking about this, and I was thinking back to many years ago when I did ballet, and I loved it, but I also got to this point where I realized that I was sort of doing it just because I had been doing it, like it was just what I had always done, and I felt sort of stuck between that. Do I stay really committed and commit even more and try to go professional, or do I quit? And so I felt like I was stuck between two very extreme options, and it was hard.
Yeah, it is that pivotal. It's that moment of, do I keep investing?
Right.
Because there's a lot of investment if you're dancing.
Yeah. Have you felt stuck?
Oh, I know I have, but I tend to. I don't know. That's I'm a evolution junkie, like a professional development junkie.
So maybe you just don't see it as being stuck.
Yeah, maybe that's a good way to put it. I'm always reevaluating, adjusting, realigning. Maybe if I was going to pick a time, I might say, it can be very overwhelming and can get very monotonous being a mom with kids at home. And so I think there was a time in my parenting where I felt stuck. Yeah, that would be mine.
Well, I'm really excited to hear your conversation with Jennie and how she has evolved and done amazing things with this season of her life.
I am so happy to welcome into our in-house studio Jennie Malone. And Jennie is a professional actress, both on stage and now in feature films, which we'll talk about. She's also a published wildlife photographer, a multi-talented musician, and a lifelong creative. And I would just like to say welcome, Jennie.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so glad you're here. I know that it's always a treat for us to have somebody in our studio. And Jennie, you have had a very interesting year and a lot of ups and downs on your creative, artistic path.
Yes.
But I want to go way back to the very beginning and why we know each other and how we met. And we met in a very bizarre production of Fiddler on the Roof.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you remember how bizarre it was? Do you
Yes,
remember that?
I do. Yes.
Yeah, we used to rehearse in this, I don't know, old school.
It was a Masonic lodge.
Okay, a Masonic lodge, and it was kind of old, but then we had a director who I actually really enjoyed the director, but he had this really weird concept about I mean, we opened with like pretending like we were in some bomb scare. Do you remember that?
Yes, the play within the play.
The play within the play, which really wasn't a play. There really wasn't such a thing. He just made it up. But as the opening, like, tragedy of this bombing happened, then we slowly evolved into the real characters.
Yes.
And who did you play?
I was Hava.
Yeah, Hava. And if you know Fiddler on the Roof, there are 3 sisters. And I actually wasn't the oldest, was I?
No, you were the middle.
I was the middle. So there's Hodel, Zeidel, which was
Zeidel's
me,
the
and
old-
then Hava. And you, and I remember we met, and she was the dancer, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So did you start your artistic career in dance?
I started both piano and dance the same year when I was 5, when I was a kid, and did both of those all through school. And I started doing musical theater in high school. I went and saw the first play my freshman year, and I hadn't auditioned for. I was too scared. I hadn't auditioned for anything freshman year, but I went and saw the play and thought, "Ooh, this looks like it could be fun." And then when auditions for the musical came up, I was still too afraid to do it. So I just went and saw the musical, and I loved it. And I thought, okay, I have to get over my fear of auditioning in front of people and try this. And so the next year, sophomore year, I started getting involved in the plays.
Well, that's refreshing because today, because I do a lot of acting coaching, and there's this crazy drive that I think might be coming from parents that their kids have to start so early and so young and so involved in everything.
Right.
And to know that you as a professional actress didn't even really step into that until you were in high school.
Yes.
Do you remember your first show?
My first show was Oliver. I played Nancy. Up until that point...
Wait, I have to stop. So my first show was Oliver.
Was it really?
But I played Bet.
Okay.
And she's the sidekick to Nancy.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
That is amazing.
Up until that point, I was very, very absorbed in dance. Probably from about 6th grade until sophomore year in high school, I wanted to be a professional ballerina. So I was taking dance at CCM, was very absorbed in that, and then I did a musical, and it just branched off in this totally different path. Once I got to sing and act also, I thought, well, I don't think I want to be a dancer only anymore because I want to get to do these other things also.
Yeah. Well,
So
and your
then it
first
just took
role.
off.
Yeah, and your first role your first show to have a big role too.
It was exciting.
Yeah. So then did you study it in college?
I did not study musical theater. I actually did opera in college. I was a voice and piano principal. I was certified to teach music grades K through 12, and I also did opera. And I really enjoyed classical music in college. But after I got out of school, my interests kind of changed, and I did my first musical out of school with Downtown Theater Classics. It was Music Man, and that totally sucked me right back into musical theater. And when I started doing musical theater, I thought, I don't want to just dance, I want to sing and act. Well, when I came back to musical theater, my thought was, I want to get to dance again, because in opera, I really wasn't getting to do that. So I kind of, veered around, but just, ended back up with musical theater after school.
And so you worked kind of like you did, because I know you're in the union and you've been working professionally, and did you work all over the country, or where did your acting career, your musical theater career take you?
All over. I've worked Texas, Florida, Virginia, North Carolina, pretty much all over. I've done 2 Southeastern tours of shows. And then a few years ago, I kind of completely changed tracks and was in the orchestra of the national tour of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And that traveled for a year. I played keyboard with the show. We did a large amount of the United States. We did a little touch of Canada, and then we went to Tokyo for a few weeks to perform at Theater Orb in Tokyo.
Did your husband go with you?
Yes,
okay.
he was.
Because he's also a musician.
Yes, he was the drummer on the tour, so we got to do that whole year together, which was amazing, because up until then, that was the longest in our entire marriage that we spent in the same place was on that tour because, you know, I was always coming and going to do shows out of town, and he has played on cruise ships. At the time, he had just done the cruise ships, but since we've done Joseph Tour, he's on his third year now of doing the national tour of Christmas Story.
Oh, that's so
He's
cool.
he's away right now doing that.
That's really cool. Now, and I remember meeting Brian, and he's a steel drummer, right? How would you describe?
Amongst other things,
Yeah.
yes. He's a drum set player, orchestral percussionist. He plays steel pan. Yes,
But the steel drums have like quite a following in Cincinnati, don't they?
Yes, yeah. We both started with the Over the Rhine Steel Band downtown, and after a few years, formed our own group so that we could do concerts and school shows during the day that community members and children that were in the Over the Rhine Steel Band couldn't do because of jobs and school. So we started our own group, which is called the Bacchanal Steel Band, and we've played many school performances, library performances. We go down to North Carolina a few times a year to work with their arts council, and we've also opened for the Beach Boys twice.
Wow, that is really cool. I could just
Yeah, that was
totally see
exciting.
that vibe
Yes.
working for the Beach Boys. And one thing I just want to sort of point out for our listeners is that Jennie, everybody thinks, oh, you have to be in New York on Broadway, you have to be in LA to be in films. And you are like this perfect example of having a full life, like a complete multifaceted life, this very busy career, not being on one of the coasts. And you look at, I see you, all the different opportunities, like there's the art part of what you do, but there's the business part of what you do. It's that good old saying, show business, the business is the longer word. And that, and we've talked about this a little bit before for this conversation, that to make a living as an artist often takes not one stream of income, not one boss or one company, one discipline for sure with you, but this web and these sort of like different streams of income,
Yes.
different streams of connections, and you and Brian, you just embody that.
We have found that diversifying is one of the most important things about completely making a living as artists. And we're both huge advocates of people doing what they want to do for a living. We have friends who sit in office jobs all day that they're miserable in. And I have nothing against office jobs. If that's what someone loves to do, that's great. But if you don't love what you're doing, you're wasting a third of your life sitting there doing something you hate to maybe get to play your instrument or sing on weekends and get to do what you love to do. So it makes me sad when people feel like they can't do this because they have to be, having like a corporate job or some other regular job to make money. We've found again that diversifying is really the way to do that. So sometimes in a given week, I will do like one of the weeks that I was filming, I would do a day or two on a film set. So that's a job. And I would play 2 different church services, play and sing at those. We would have a couple steel drum gigs. So it's
all the while probably auditioning and connecting,
always constantly
and
looking for work. That's the downside of what we do for a living, is that you don't just go through a period where you send out your resumes, do interviews, and finally get a job and keep it for a long period of time.
It's a hustle.
Yes, hustling is pretty much what we're always doing. And, with musical theater, you'll take a job, sometimes the contract will be, 5 weeks to 3 months or whatever. And there's always this, euphoria that you have a job, and then kind of this crash as soon as it opens. You're like, oh, wow, well, in 6 weeks, the show's going to close, and I have to have another job. I have to line up other stuff.
And I want to kind of also note that that's the same for people that are on Broadway and for people who are in movies. Mm-hmm. Their job is only secure as that contract.
Yeah, you're constantly looking. I mean, there are long-running shows. Like the year that we were on the Joseph Tour, I have to say that it felt so great to go for a long period of time not having to look for work. Because it was just like I kind of forgot about that part of the whole business because I knew I had this thing for an entire year.
So speaking of looking for work, you've had an interesting year and a half.
Yes.
And so going back to, we said that we worked together when we were, I probably was just married. You weren't even married. Fast forward 20 years. What happened over the last year for you?
The last year or so has very much been a struggle in musical theater. I used to work quite a lot. I would pretty much whenever I wanted to have a job, I would, because I've been married my entire career. And I don't want to be away from my husband all the time. So I always tried to format my schedule so that I'd be gone a couple months, home a couple months, gone. So I was very careful about scheduling shows. And I always felt like I really had my pick of what I wanted to do. And I would turn down jobs sometimes because I'm like, well, I want to be home for a little bit. So I'm going to spend this 6 weeks or 2 months or with Brian instead of going away to do this other thing. So for many years, things just all fell into place like that. And then suddenly they weren't falling into place so much anymore. And that definitely has corresponded with aging. And unfortunately, in musical theater, there are many, many roles for younger females. And as you get older, there are a lot less roles. And right now I feel that I've fallen kind of into the dead space between the young roles and the older roles where I'm just not fitting in well anywhere. So, I mean, I spent my entire career playing characters that are much younger than I am, sometimes much, much younger. You're still getting cast as a 16-year-old the year I turned 40. But that, of course, needed to come to an end, and I was ready to move on to other stuff. But I've had the problem of not jumping straight to the old characters yet, and being outright told at callbacks or auditions, you just don't look old enough to play the parent of the people that are really in their 20s and 30s that are playing these younger characters right now. So I'm kind of in a holding pattern a little bit. That's at least what it feels like.
Yeah, and musical theater, maybe not theater, because theater seems to be there's a little bit more range of characters.
I agree.
Musical theater tends to be like archetypal characters. So there's the young ingenue, the silly friend, the
funny aunt,
right, the old woman, the
yes.
Stodgy old man, and
yes.
So and there really isn't that like strong, empowered woman in that middle space,
right?
Because I'm dealing with the same exact thing, and you and I are both smaller people, and so even our size can be a hindrance because I think small is often equated with young.
Yes.
Because I played younger than myself, and then I'm often told, and I think you shared with me, I'm often told you need to gain weight, you need to be bigger.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, I don't know. It's just not how my body's made.
Right.
And so it's like accepting who I am, accepting who you are. And then is it just a waiting game? Is it a change? Do we change ourselves?
Yeah. I've struggled a lot with, do I need to change how I look somehow? But I am me. I don't want to change who I am just to please a producer to get them to hire me. So I've kind of resisted, doing that stuff and just, standing my ground and being me and waiting for someone to want what I am now.
And it
to
may
hire.
Yeah, and it may be. I remember as a really young girl, like in my teens, late teens, wanting to do commercial work and auditioning and never getting anything. And then I hit an age, and the same auditions that I wasn't getting, I started getting everything.
Right.
And I know it was just an age thing. And so the way that I viewed that time, and I can maybe share with you and remind myself, is that all those auditions that I wasn't getting were preparing me to be better at auditioning for the ones that I was able to then get.
I do have to say, though, that even though it probably is preparing you to be better, my experience the past year or so with musical theater is that I feel like it was breaking me down, that I was going to audition after audition and suddenly getting rejected by everyone instead of getting hired by people. And it started making every audition feel like it was the end of the world. Like, this is the most important thing ever, and I have to land this job because I have not gotten a job in a while. So you almost feel desperate, and it's a terrible way to walk in feeling, and you walk out feeling terrible too.
And that desperate energy.
Oh, I'm sure it reads.
It's like a gripping.
Yeah.
And so, and people for sure can sense that.
Yeah, so I finally had to step away from auditioning for theater for a while because I feel like it was kind of ruining me. I was depressed because I've spent my entire adult life and my teenage years doing what I love to do. I've always been in musicals or, in the case of college, in operas. And 2018 was a really rough year for me because, in thinking about all of it, I realized that it was the first time since my sophomore year in high school that I went through an entire year without being in a show.
Wow.
And it depressed me terribly. So,
But I watched The Path, social media, we get to kind of peek into people's journeys. And what kind of opened up for you was also surprising, I think, but also this incredible passion that had been there had a space to come forward and allowed you to explore. So I would just love for you to share, because, they say when a door closes, a window opens. Yeah. And so tell us about what that window was like.
Well, I absolutely love bird photography. It's something I've been doing as an amateur. I think the first time I started taking pictures of birds was in...
You're like the Renaissance woman. You play like 20 instruments, a prima ballerina, and now you're a bird photographer. It's very, very cool.
I was working at a theater out in Pennsylvania, and there was a pond, a little lake right in town, probably a mile from where the theater was. And I started going down to this lake and taking pictures of birds. And I didn't have a super great camera, but I got into taking pictures of the ducks and geese. And I already liked birds. So it kind of became a thing. And over the next several years, I really got into shorebirds, lots of gulls, pigeons, pretty much any birds that hung around and weren't afraid of people, because a lot of beach birds are waiting to snatch your lunch, so they weren't afraid to come up to people, so they were a lot easier to get pictures of. So that's what I started with. And then a few years ago I upgraded cameras, and it was just becoming a bigger and bigger thing for me, just totally,
just like a hobby.
Yeah, totally, as a hobby. And then in the winter of 2018, I was actually in New York for audition season, and a friend approached me about using pictures of my birds in a book of poetry and thoughts that he was writing. And I was, of course, super excited about that and nervous about it, and
but validation.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But of course, there's always that word like, oh, are these going to be good enough? But he wanted to use some of my photos in his publication. And the book is called Inspired By. It's by Michael Walker. And that project, I think, kept my mood afloat during that time where I could not find a musical theater job, because I had this thing to focus on that was artistic and that I loved. So, throughout that period, we were working on choosing pictures and emailing back and forth all that stuff and working with the publisher. And it was very exciting to have that project going on. So fast forward to this February, I went down to Florida for audition season. And I was, of course, not looking forward to it, because I wasn't looking forward to all the rejection again, since auditioning hadn't been going very well. And during that time, I really used my bird photography for the happiness factor, I was going birding almost every day during the 6 weeks that I was down there, and I took literally thousands of pictures.
Yeah, and I've seen some of them, and they're incredible.
Thank you.
And I remember, I don't know if it was a week or if it was just that whole time, but it was also fascinating to observe the kinds of birds that you caught a glimpse of and were able to
Yes.
capture in photography.
Yeah, I was keeping track of lists of birds, of new things I've seen, and now that's kind of become a game to me. When I go to a new place for a job or we're traveling, I try to find birds that I've never seen before.
It's like, where's Waldo?
Yeah, kind of. Yes. Yeah. Like, where's the parrot? Because we've gone to several different countries that had wild parrots or parakeets, and I've spent days stalking these things because I do not want to leave Amsterdam without getting a picture of this rose-ringed parakeet.
And did you get one?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. So that's I spent 2 weeks in Albuquerque back in January studying with a good musician friend out there. And I had to get a picture of a roadrunner while I was there because I'd never even seen one in person at that point. And the first full day I was there, I got some great roadrunner pictures. So then the rest of the time I was there, I was like, okay, anything else I get now is icing on the cake.
So cool.
It's something that I've become extremely excited about. And
So what I also remember is that you then received awards and recognition.
yeah, over the summer, I entered some fairs with my photography for the first time. I mean, I had done fairs as a kid in sewing and crafts, and I think I did cooking one year through 4-H. But I had never done any of the photography stuff. I wasn't into photography at all when I was a kid. So I decided, this year, okay, I'm going to try that. And, doing other stuff with birds besides a hobby has been it's been a little bit, I don't know how to say it. I've had to really think about it because, I absolutely love theater and music, but because it's my job, it becomes stressful. And I was worried about making birds a stressful thing if I started getting competitive with them or if I was trying to use birds to make money. So I've kind of steered away from, going down some photography path of, trying to do it professionally, at least for now, because I don't want birds to become a stressful thing. But the fairs ended up being incredibly fun. For my first try at them, I ended up winning things at all 3 fairs that I did.
That is
which
so
kind
incredible,
of blew my mind.
Jenny.
But
Yeah.
but I don't want.
it's validation.
Yes.
And I just love that what's so beautiful, and you sort of said this at the beginning about how all these jobs were coming to you in musical theater to where you really could design the life you wanted and the schedule you wanted. And now that completely now that's in charge.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this other opportunity came forward. You're getting validation, but now you're consciously deciding,
Yes.
where is this in my creative journey? Is this to feed my soul and my happiness in this dry period for the artistic work I do? But you have a choice because you've been validated, you've been recognized. So it's not that desperation. So that's pretty empowering. And so whatever you do with it, maybe it will unfold. Maybe there will be some money, or maybe it is just that nurturing of your artistic soul in this process.
Right now it's just something I love, and I'm still hesitant to make birds something competitive because I don't want them to be stressful at all.
Yeah. So last night, I think, or a couple nights ago, you were on the red carpet because
Yes.
Cincinnati's becoming quite a spot for feature filmmaking. And you were in a feature film.
Yes.
And they had what do they call it?
It was a private screening.
Okay. The opening night, or what do they call that? The film, when people go to the red
Premiere?
carpet, the premiere. Yeah. So you were at the local premiere.
Yes.
And so how has that been in this sort of time of musical theater sort of changing for you, but this film work kind of opening up also?
Definitely a blessing during this period where I've not been doing a lot of theater. I've ended up having 3 film opportunities this year that have been pretty incredible. And the one that came out the other night is the first of the 3 that I did. I shot this one back in mid-February. And again, like the bird photography, I feel like these projects have kind of kept me afloat while I've not been doing a lot of theater.
Mm-hmm. And so what, do you have a vision, or do you have a next step with theater, or are you just letting it kind of be what it is?
I did end up doing a musical in August here in Cincinnati, and that was a great experience. It was, the first one I'd done in a while, and it felt really good to get back on stage doing musical theater again. And I will be involved at Christmas with Awaited at the Aronoff, which I'm super excited about. Mm-hmm. So the rest of the year is kind of set, and then we hit January, and I'm back to the audition game and looking for work and trying to figure out what 2020 will be. But film has definitely filled a gap for me, and I do feel like right now there are more age-appropriate roles for me in film than in musical theater. And I've also gotten to break out into some really interesting characters that are very different than what I normally do. Not so much in the film that I just did, in the Dark Waters film, but in the other 2 that I did this year that'll be coming out later, I played some vastly different characters. And I do feel like in musical theater at this point, I am extremely pigeonholed to the same kind of characters. And it's really hard to get out of that box once your resume is full of a certain kind of thing. And right now, I don't have that restriction in film. I don't feel like they're looking at me as a certain type right now. And that feels amazing.
Yeah. So much. I mean, so many things that I think you share for our listeners, that it's about continuing to move forward, being true to yourself. You talk about listening to what those things that bring joy, moving forward. We talked about how the industry has created this big block for you. What about you? What, even when things are going well or you're stepping into something new, what would you say are your biggest sort of resistances or personal challenges in the moments where you're looking to put yourself out creatively?
Hands down, lack of confidence, fear. I've never felt that I have the personality of a lot of performers, especially live performers. A lot of theater people are very outgoing, and I'm not. I don't want to stand up at a party and sing show tunes because I get nervous. I don't like that.
I'll just tell you, I'm the same way. I cannot stand karaoke parties. I get so scared.
Yeah,
I'm invited to one this week and I don't want to go.
Yeah, I don't deal well with those situations. I am a nervous person, unfortunately, and I've always fought a lack of self-confidence, and it rears its ugly head sometimes. And my entire career, I have battled with audition anxiety, anxiety problem that is really specific to auditions. It doesn't affect me much in performance. And even if I am nervous about performance, I usually don't have a problem getting past it. But I have had definite issues in auditions that have tripped me up.
And how does that show up for you? What does that look like?
Shaking voice sometimes. I had one disastrous audition many years ago that I flew all the way to LA for, was very excited about, had a scheduled audition time, which I do a lot better with a scheduled time where I could just walk in right before the audition, go in and do it. But I flew out there with an appointment, and they decided to completely disregard the appointments, and I ended up sitting there for 7 hours waiting to do my audition. And by the time I went in to do it, I was such a nervous wreck that I cracked on the last note of my song. And it was something that had never happened to me before and was so mortifying that I couldn't believe that I'd spent all that money to go out there and that I had blown my chance. It was an audition for a national tour, and I was so upset with myself. But as I said, auditions have always been a bit of a struggle for me and have, in a way, held me back in my career. There are some times where I'm too scared to put myself out there for a certain thing, or I'm like, oh, well, they'd never pick me. So then I won't even try. But I've been trying to get over that.
Yeah, well, you have worked so consistently for so many years. So how do you in the moment cope with that? Is there a trick or a tip you could share with listeners?
Gosh, that's tough because sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I can't, like, if I'm at an audition that is something that is extremely important to me, sometimes there is nothing I can do to control the nerves, and that is very frustrating because it's the most important things that I feel like I blow because it's the things that I want the most and get the most nervous about. But I mean, I've definitely used deep breathing techniques before. For me, it's always best to show up right when it's time to do the audition. The longer I sit there, the longer I'm around the other actors, the longer I'm in the building, the more nervous I get. So I wouldn't say that I cut things close per se, but I'll arrive and stay outside in my car, or stand, when I'm in New York and, take the subway to something, stand outside the building or whatever till it gets pretty close to my time where I have to check in, just so I can be alone and keep control of my nerves before I walk in there.
Yeah, that's really helpful because knowing what works and what doesn't work for you does set you up for success.
Yes. It took me a long time to figure that out. I would go to, when I was non-equity, I would go to auditions in New York where you had to line up hours before the audition actually happened. And I would stand in line with all these super outgoing, chatty actors that wanted to talk about everything that they've ever done. And it was very intimidating to me to sit there and listen to these people all talk about, well, I've done this, I've done that. I didn't want to hear any of that. And I was always a wreck by the time I got in to audition. And then once I became equity and was able to make appointments for things, it really changed my auditioning life because it mostly eliminated the sitting in line forever, waiting to be seen and getting more and more nervous.
Yeah. And I would also say, just as you've shared through the whole story and your whole journey, is that you also work very hard. You show up prepared.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. As a nervous person, if I'm unprepared for something, it's even worse. So I'm very much a practicer, preparer for anything. I don't like to be put in situations where something's shoved in front of me, like, here, do this. And, that makes me very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So I really like having things in advance and being able to learn them on my own.
Okay, so one last question before we wrap up. You've shared so many pearls of wisdom on the journey that you've been experiencing, but what would be your one bit of advice for the person who feels stuck?
A mistake that I made a long time ago is that I allowed my identity to become completely wrapped up in being a musical theater performer. That is what I always thought of myself. And when I suddenly was not getting to do that all the time anymore, I had no idea who I was. I felt completely lost. And it was pointed out to be by multiple people, you have let your entire identity get wrapped up in your profession. So you need to think about who you are apart from doing that. So I had to do a lot of thinking. And a friend of mine, a good friend, suggested that I make a vision board. And I think it was one of the best things that I've ever done. I went through... I did it the old-fashioned way, going through a magazine and cutting out words and pictures, and just kept it all very positive. And I have to say, I didn't put musical theater on that board because at the moment, musical theater was so negative to me that I didn't want it to be a part of this positive thing I was making. But I put music on it, and I put photography and birds, and I put Florida because I absolutely love Florida and I want to move there someday. And I just put a lot of... sayings that made me feel good. And as it was presented to me by this friend, that when you put that positive energy out into the world, instead of all the negativity of, I can't find a job, I'm not doing this well, all that negativity was going out, so nothing good was coming back. Well, with this vision board, I was putting out this positivity, and almost immediately it felt like it started coming back to me, and these opportunities opened up. Several of these films, the musical I did this summer, getting offered this musical for Christmas, like a lot of things happened after I let go of that negativity. So not getting mired down in the negativity is extremely important. Even if you don't know what direction you want to go or what you want to do, you just have to kind of breathe and step back and think about it and think about, okay, what other things in life do I really love besides this one thing that I've been doing?
That is so helpful, Jennie, and so true. And that I love how it was about the positive thinking and sort of the things that brought happiness to you, but it also was about your identity. Mm-hmm. That's pretty big, especially for women.
Yeah, I was totally lost in my career without that thing, and realized, wow, I am more than just a musical theater singer dancer.
And a lot of women might say, I'm more than just a wife, or I'm more than just a mother, or I'm more than just a... So thank you for that. That is super, super valuable. And it's just been so fun having you here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And we'll have you back. Thanks, Jennie.
You.
I just loved that interview with Jennie so much, and it was so cool to hear the backstory behind all the amazing posts that we see her post in the Creative Uncovery Facebook group that she's part of with us. And also, I just wanted to make sure everyone knows how to find her amazing bird photography or her acting work. So if you're interested in the bird photography, which is amazing, I also love birds, so I'm excited about it. It's www.birdartbyjennie, that's JENNIE.com. And then if you're interested in what she does with acting or performing, you can go to www.jenniemalone.com. And Jennie is, of course, spelled the same way, and Malone is Malone.
And if you are in a place of stuckness, I am setting up discovery calls to help people sort of navigate that next step. And if you'd like to set up a free call with me, just email me at Elle@LZimmerman. And the way to find the Facebook group is Creative Uncovery on Facebook. I'm so grateful you joined us for today's episode. I bet you're here because you know there's something more for your life. Whether you're moving into something creative or letting go in order to take that next creative step, I have something for you. My free guide to graceful transitions. You can find it at ellzimmerman.com/transitions. And remember, if she made it, you can too.